I want you to picture a paradox for a second.
Okay, lay it on me.
So if you look at Switzerland, you see a country with mandatory military service, right?
Yeah.
Like practically every household has a literal Sig Sauer rifle just sitting in a closet or a safe.
Yeah, which is pretty wild to think about.
Right. The population is heavily armed, and yet it is undeniably one of the safest, most peaceful societies on Earth. But then, you know, pan over to the United
Oh
States.
yeah, total contrast.
Exactly. You have the most powerful, heavily funded state apparatus in human history. Vast police forces, incredible surveillance, just endless military dominance.
And yet the reality on the ground feels increasingly chaotic.
Yes, crime surges, trust is completely collapsing. How can a so-called strong state descend into absolute disorder while an armed populace remains perfectly peaceful?
It completely breaks how we usually map politics, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're trained to think, more state power equals more order, or more weapons equals more chaos.
But the reality on the street just completely defies that logic, which is exactly why today's deep dive is going to be so fascinating.
For sure.
Today, we're looking at a deeply provocative essay by Elias Kunis called The Thermodynamics of Power. And our mission today is to completely reframe how you think about government, law, and violence.
Yet we are stripping away all the morality and just looking at human society through the lens of physics.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to solve that Switzerland paradox, we first have to fundamentally redefine what violence actually is, right?
That is the crucial first step, yeah. Kunis's core premise is kind of jarring, but it's essential. He argues that violence is not a moral category at all.
Not a moral category.
It is a thermodynamic one. He defines it as kinetic social friction.
Wait, kinetic social friction, like in actual physics?
Exactly like physics. Think about it. When you apply direct force that destroys an organized structure, like a building burning down or a bridge collapsing, you are converting complexity into heat. You're increasing entropy.
Oh, wow, okay.
And Kunis says that power is just energy doing work. You can't, moralize it away. You can't send power to an ethics seminar and teach it to be good.
Right.
You can only channel it through structural architecture.
Let me try to visualize this, because I think it helps to picture human civilization as a giant engine.
Oh, I like that.
So in the state of nature, what Hobbes called the war of all against all the engine is grinding without any oil. It's just raw metal scraping on metal.
Tons of friction.
Right. And in that scenario, every single person is spending massive amounts of personal energy just, staying vigilant. You're building walls, you're holding a spear, waiting for the tribe next door to attack.
And the thermodynamic cost of that is massive.
Because of that constant friction, you simply can't build complex things. You can't build cathedrals or universities because you're too busy guarding your front door.
Exactly. The energy that could be used to build a civilization is constantly dissipated in these micro-conflicts. It creates an arms race dynamic.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I have to spend calories arming myself because you spend calories arming yourself. High entropy systems dissipate energy as heat, which is violence, rather than doing productive work.
So if violence is essentially just the engine friction of human existence, how did we ever invent the oil to lubricate it?
Well, Kunis argues this happens through a thermodynamic phase transition.
Like water turning into ice.
Exactly like that. When water is liquid or gas, the molecules are bouncing around chaotically. High entropy, high friction, but drop the temperature and those molecules lock into a rigid grid.
And that grid is the state.
You got it. It
Okay.
forces structure onto the chaos. We invented the state not as some noble social contract, but as coordination software.
Coordination software. I love that phrasing so much. It just reframes the whole government as an operating system.
It functions exactly like one, and it operates on a basic thermodynamic trait. The population, the substrate, as he calls them, surrenders their individual swords to a central reservoir.
And in exchange.
In exchange, you don't have to worry about your neighbor's sword anymore. The energy you used to spend on defense, on that ambient anxiety, is suddenly liberated.
It's freed up for productive things. Art, technology, raising a family.
Right. The state is just an architectural constraint that converts kinetic friction into the potential energy of law.
Okay, but wait. I'm stuck on something here.
What's that?
If the entire point of the state as our coordination software is that we surrender our swords, how does Switzerland fit in? They literally kept their swords.
They absolutely did.
Isn't that fundamentally breaking the thermodynamic trade we just talked about?
It seems like a massive contradiction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But this brings us directly to what Kunis identifies as a massive civilizational misunderstanding of Max Weber.
Oh, the sociologist.
Yeah. Weber famously defined the modern state as the entity that successfully claims a monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force.
Right, which usually means the state has a monopoly on the act of violence itself. Like, only the cops can use force.
That's the common assumption, yeah. But Kunis argues we have it completely dead wrong.
Really?
Yeah, he says the state's monopoly is strictly on the judgment of violence, not the execution of violence.
Oh, wait. Adjudication versus execution?
Exactly, a monopoly on adjudication.
Okay, let me see if I'm tracking the mechanics here. So, if the state handles the judgment, then me defending my home against an intruder isn't vigilante justice.
Okay.
It's me acting as a temporary, deputized agent of the state software until the actual authorities get there.
That is the retroactive audit in a nutshell.
The retroactive audit.
Yeah, so when a force is used by a citizen, the state acting as the constitutional skeleton performs an audit after the fact. It asks, was this violence constitutional? Was it legitimate self-defense?
And if the courts say yes.
Then the violence is retroactively authorized. You executed the force, but the state retained its absolute monopoly on adjudicating whether it was legal.
And if you just, I don't know, attack someone unprovoked over a parking spot.
Then the audit fails. And the state applies overwhelming counterforce to crush you and put you in a cage.
Wow. Okay, that entirely resolves the Switzerland paradox.
Right.
Switzerland is peaceful precisely because the state holds a strict, airtight monopoly on adjudication. The laws are crystal clear. The courts actually work.
Yes. Everyone knows the rules of the coordination software.
So allowing citizens to retain the physical capacity for execution, having that rifle in the home, it doesn't increase entropy because everyone knows the rules.
What's fascinating here is that when you achieve this precise balance, what Kunis calls an effective monopoly, the state actually offloads the energy cost of defense back onto the citizens.
Which makes the whole system more resilient.
Incredibly resilient. The state doesn't have to spend massive amounts of thermodynamic energy policing every single alleyway because predators know the citizens are capable of execution.
So we have this balanced system, right? The state handles the rules, citizens can execute them as needed. But what happens when governments tweak those dials?
You mean when they try to claim the monopoly on execution too?
Yeah, like when they try to engineer away the citizens' capacity entirely. Kunis lays out a spectrum for this, right?
He does. 3 manifestations. The balanced system, like Switzerland or the Czech Republic, is the effective monopoly. But push the dial too far, and you get the absolute monopoly.
This is where the state tries to make all private violence physically impossible.
Correct. Completely disarmed populace, heavy surveillance, zero tolerance for self-defense, sometimes even a legal duty to retreat from your own home. Kunis calls this the human garden.
A human garden, meaning it's safe, but...
Safe, but entirely devoid of agency. If the gardener leaves or gets defunded, the plants just die. They have no capacity to protect themselves.
Oh, that makes sense.
Plus, it's highly brittle and thermodynamically exhausting to maintain. The central authority has to expend massive energy policing every micro-interaction.
It's like forcing the coordination software to run too many background processes until the CPU just overheats.
Great analogy, yeah.
But what about the other end? When the state just goes bankrupt or collapses, like the monopoly is on the books, but nobody's answering 9/11.
That's the failed monopoly.
Yeah.
Think of Somalia or cartel-controlled parts of Mexico. Total entropy spiral.
Because there's no legal framework for adjudication.
Right. It's a rapid reversion back to Hobbes' war of all against all, but without any legal protections. You get all the costs of anarchy and none of the benefits of distributed defense.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Kunis doesn't just look at failed states or history, he brings this directly into modern Western nations.
Yeah, he diagnoses a very specific modern pathology.
Right, and we need to unpack this.
He calls it anarcho-tyranny. And he describes it as the exact precise inversion of the healthy, effective monopoly we talked about in Switzerland.
An inversion. So what does that look like?
The state aggressively maintains its execution monopoly against law-abiding citizens. It prosecutes self-defense, ensures the populace is disarmed, but simultaneously.
It abdicates its adjudication monopoly against actual predators.
Exactly. Decriminalizing property theft, releasing violent offenders, tolerating no-go zones.
He calls this the vacuum cage. You're trapped in a cage where you can't defend yourself, but the door is left wide open to the wolves.
And the governing class, the interface, does this because they default to the path of least resistance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, suppressing real predatory crime is incredibly hard. Busting an organized cartel takes massive physical risks. It's thermodynamically exhausting.
It takes immense energy to fight actual chaos.
Right. But auditing a middle-class citizen's taxes, arresting someone for an illegal firearm modification, that requires almost zero kinetic energy.
Because the citizen is already compliant.
Exactly. They'll show up to court.
Yeah.
It's much easier to extract taxes from a docile populace, claim you're providing security, and do absolutely nothing about the high-friction predators.
Okay, and I need to pause here for a second just to be completely transparent with you, the listener. Kunis provides very specific, politically charged examples of this anarcho-tyranny in the essay. He points to the Daniel Penny subway vigilante case in New York. He points to organized shoplifting in San Francisco. And he points to border policies where citizens are prosecuted, but mass entry is allowed.
Yeah, those are his core case studies.
Right. And I want to be super clear.
Mm.
We are absolutely not taking any political sides here. We aren't endorsing these viewpoints. We're merely unpacking the source text's argument impartially to understand his underlying theory.
Absolutely. The point is to understand the mechanisms he's proposing, which is the state punishing the compliant citizen while ignoring the systemic friction.
Right. And within that framework, he actually gives us a way to measure the health of our own society, doesn't he?
Yes. He calls it the aliveness metric.
Which is such a cool name.
The test is simple. Does the state's monopoly on violence liberate your energy, or does it trap it?
Bring it right back to the physics equation.
Exactly. In a healthy monopoly, your energy is liberated. You don't worry about being mugged. You don't spend money fortifying your house. That cognitive energy is freed up. You feel alive.
But in a parasitic monopoly, under anarcho-tyranny,
your energy is trapped. You worry about being mugged, Andy. You worry about being arrested if you defend yourself.
Yeah.
You pay taxes for security, then have to pay again for private security, or live with this constant draining ambient anxiety.
The energy is trapped in defensive overhead. It's the worst of both worlds. You're paying for the coordination software, but it's actively working against you.
Precisely.
So if anarcho-tyranny is the disease, how does the author propose we engineer a cure? What does the right architecture actually look like?
He argues the optimal architecture requires two equally necessary components: power and constraint.
Okay.
Power is the head, the physical capacity to coerce. Without overwhelming force, the state is just an academic philosophy seminar.
Anarchy with a syllabus, basically.
Yeah.
Zero capacity to enforce anything in the real world.
Right. But power alone isn't enough. You also need constraint, which he calls the skeleton.
The constitutional rules.
Yes, defining exactly when that force is legitimate. Without the skeleton, the state isn't a government. It's a bandit. It's a protection racket. That's tyranny.
If we connect this to the bigger picture.
True civilization is not the absence of force. Humans are physical creatures in a physical world. Friction will always exist.
So true civilization is
The successful containment of force through constitutional geometry. The state monopolizes the adjudication, the rules, the courts, but allows citizens to retain execution within those bounds.
So what does this all mean? It means the state actually has to provide tangible security to maintain its legitimacy.
Yes, the sword must be sharp against predators, but the sheath must be strong to protect citizens.
I love that. The sword and the sheath. So look, to you listening right now, this fundamentally changes how you look at every institution.
It really does.
The state isn't a moral parent. It's a thermodynamic engine meant to save you the energy of defending yourself. So look at your own life. How much ambient anxiety are you carrying around?
That's the real test.
How much cognitive energy are you spending double-checking locks or worrying about your security? Because that trapped energy is the exact friction the state was engineered to prevent.
Which is incredibly profound. But, this raises an important question.
Oh.
And this goes a bit beyond Kunis's text, but if you view society as an energy network, if the traditional nation state is failing as our coordination software, trapping our energy instead of liberating it, what comes next?
Oh, wow.
Will we soon see private technology networks, decentralized communities, or even massive corporations offering alternative adjudication framework?
That is wild.
If power is just physics, could the thermodynamics of power eventually shift away from physical geography entirely and move into digital opt-in networks?
That's such a wild thought to end on. If the state is just software, eventually people are going to want to upgrade to a better operating system. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the architecture of the world around you. Keep looking for the physics behind the politics. And the next time you see a picture of a Swiss citizen with a rifle, you'll know exactly why their street is so quiet. Until next time.